So a few people have told me now that I should take a look at this channel and do a reaction. And I have seen some of his videos in the past, but I hadn't really gotten as far as looking for one that I could do a reaction to. So I thought, yeah, I should really jump in and have a look and see what's on offer. So I have to say, this is another one of those fabulous creators who is intelligent, basically. I think that pretty much sums it up. He is intelligent. He thinks for himself. He listens to what he's told and he analyses it first before taking it as fact. He also uses his eyes, so if he's told something, if his eyes are telling him something else, he's going to call bullshit on it. So this is definitely a worthwhile channel to be looking at. So I thought I would check out one of his videos, which is... Now, before I jump in, I should probably mention 5 bad things I have about Australia. Bought a new set of headphones, which obviously therefore has a new mic, and so I'm still working on getting the sound balance right. So don't feel embarrassed to leave a comment below if you think that I still haven't quite got the audio balance quite right. As a creator, one of the things that you do is that you are constantly looking at what you've previously done, trying to figure out what you can do better, what you can improve on. So feedback, when it's positive, I'm always open to positive feedback on my channel. Anything that will help me to grow my channel. And certainly audio is super important, so if I am not getting it right with the audio, I'd like to know rather than find out down the track. Let's jump in and check out this video.
AI is the next big thing, so I thought it would be a fun idea to ask ChatGPT what it thinks of certain places that I've visited. And today I'm going to find out the 5 best and worst things about Australia. Let's start with the positives and go for the 5 best things what GPT thinks of Australia. Now, the first one is natural beauty. Australia is known for its stunning natural beauty with breathtaking landscapes, beaches and wildlife. Well, I can certainly agree with that. The Blue Mountains, which we went to, was absolutely stunning. It was breathtaking to see the endless green gorge. It was just beautiful.
He is so spot on there about the Blue Mountains. If you've never been to the Blue Mountains, I recommend that you put it on your bucket list. I remember going up to Lura, which is just out of Katoomba, and going to a lookout at the end of the street where I was staying, and you looked out and just the sight was phenomenal. I can't even describe it. It's like just there's this trees everywhere and the hills and just utterly breathtaking. So yeah, he's spot on there.
The beaches, the golden sands of the beaches, it is amazing. And those are the places that we've seen when we visited Australia. So I can certainly agree with natural beauty. Next one, multiculturalism. Australia is a melting pot of cultures and ethnicities with a diverse and welcoming society. Now, before I learnt about Australia, I thought it was just a very white place. And it is not. After visiting, we've seen a lot of Asian people, but that makes sense because it's so close.
Okay, I think we should acknowledge here that while we do get a heck of a lot of Asian tourists, that not every Asian that you see in Australia is necessarily Asian, in terms of they are Australians with Asian heritage, We have people here who are third or fourth or fifth generation Australians with Asian heritage. We were a goldfields country, and so many Chinese came to Australia to seek their fortune. So let's recognise that part of our multiculturalism is still, these people are still Australians, but with heritage of a particular country. This is no criticism of Rob, and I'm certainly not trying to correct him or anything here. I'm just sort of adding to what he's saying.
There are people from all walks of life, from all ethnicities, and it really is a melting pot, something that I didn't realise until I actually went to Australia. And it is so amazing to see that the cultures, yes, the cultures are becoming Australian, but it broadens what Australia is, you know, what the Australian culture really is. And that's great to see as well.
So far, I'm going with a 10 out of 10 for these observations. These are things that are so spot on. I mean, I remember I grew up in a community that had a large Greek population and a large Polish population, and that became part of the identity of the community where I lived. You know, I grew up around Greek and Polish kids, and you know, picked up on some of their language quirks, and you know, picked up on some of their traditions and things like that.
Quality of life. Australia consistently ranks highly on global quality of life indices due to its stable economy, excellent healthcare system, and low crime rates. Now, I can't talk about low crime rates because, well, I suppose I wasn't mugged. So there we go, that's something. But quality of life is it's very subjective, right?
So one of my videos a little while back, I'm not sure if I had made the comment in the video or if it was in the comments, but I had pushed this notion that quality of life is subjective. It's not measurable by a bunch of statistics. Sure, that gives you some indication, but it is not the be all and end all. And I can remember there was one person really attacking me in my comment section, or at least really going at it in the comment section, trying to say that America had a better quality of life because of these particular statistics. Now, I can't even remember what that was. I pretty much, you know, did the very diplomatic responses and then just put it out of my mind. So if that person is watching right now, Rob is saying exactly what I was saying. It is entirely subjective. Yes, there are things that are measurable, but there are things that are unique to the individuals. The things that I might see as meaning good quality of life, you might not view as being important to quality of life. There'll be things that we all agree on, but there'll be things that people see differently. So kudos to Rob for pointing this out.
Now, I think overall, yes, the quality of life, you see a lot of people saying life is better in Australia that have moved to Australia. So I've got to take their word for it. You know, money is better. Yes, things are more expensive, but some things are cheaper. But generally, the wages are higher over in Australia. And I think if you round everything off cost-wise, it's similar to other locations like the UK. So if you're earning more, it's a better way of life. You know, you have a lot of sun, and so that puts you in a good mood. Unless it's really hot, then, oh, I don't know. You have to stay inside in the aircon. But I would probably agree. I think your excellent healthcare system is very similar to the NHS, so there are problems, but it's also something worth fighting for sure. So quality of life, yeah. Next, education. Australia has a world-class education system with renowned universities and high-quality vocational training.
Something that I also can agree on. I am going to say, however, this is put at risk when decision makers who have no background in education start trying to implement policies, etc., simply because they've seen them happen in other countries. And this is something that has occurred a few times in the last 10, 15 years where policies have been introduced in Australia following policies from America or the UK, and some muckety muck high up has got the idea that this sounds like a great idea, and they've not looked at the fact that the countries that they're copying are actually starting to wind down whatever it is that Australia is now copying because they are recognising that it hasn't been successful. So I think for Australia to continue to have high levels of education, they need to go back to listening to teachers, listening to those people who are in the front line about what constitutes good education, and not simply follow practices because they're done in another country and they sound good on paper.
Now, once again, I don't really have any real opinion on this one. This is, I've got to take for ChatGPT's word on this one. So please, in the comments, give me your feedback. Is the education as high quality as OpenAI thinks?
I think you just have to look at a lot of what has been achieved in the research field within many, many Australian universities. That is world-class research that is happening right here in Australia. And even, and this seems to be under-recognised, but in the IT field, Australia is definitely giving the other countries a run for their money in terms of the people that they are turning out with qualifications that take them into the IT industry. People who are then offered jobs in other countries, the US, the UK, etc., based on the skills that they have acquired.
I would like to think it's probably a very similar education to the UK. So you're going to get some good places, you're going to get some bad places. But overall, it's better than a lot of other countries, you know?
I think he's right, and it is similar to UK. And on that note, a lot of recent policies that have been introduced in Australia are policies that had been implemented in the UK, and Australia looked at those and followed along. Unfortunately, some of those policies that have been introduced are putting incredible stress on teachers and pushing teachers out of the workplace at somewhat alarming rates, and leading to staffing shortages because there is too much pressure on the teachers with requirements which are more about the paperwork and all the bureaucratical bullcrap as opposed to just being in the classroom and teaching. So there is some positives and negatives to Australia adopting policies from England. That said, at the same time, in terms of quality of education, I think we are definitely on par with countries such as the UK and the US.
Next, sporting culture. Australia has a passion for sport, the world-class athletes and major international events. Now we know Australia has world-class athletes, whether it's from the cricket world, whether it's from the tennis world, and so on. these are athletes that compete all around the world in world events.
Like competing in breakdancing at the Olympics, for example.
And then you get the events like AFL where it is just Australia, pretty much. But we know Australia has a passion for sport. There is me at the AFL Grand Final. I know that Australia is passionate for sport. And yes, you've got the big ones, the AFL, the cricket, the rugby league. But even in the minor sports to Australia, rugby union and football, the fans that are with that sport are as passionate as anyone, So it doesn't matter what sport, the fans are clearly very, very passionate.
That is so true. And I find it amusing that as someone who doesn't follow AFL, that you get so much ribbing from people who are die-hard footy fans who think that it is so un-Australian for you to not give a rat's ass about the footy. Now, I do want to mention also, he's here talking about die-hard fans. Look at the sort of stuff that goes on in the UK. That is die-hard fans, in my opinion. We thankfully don't have riots here at our footy games, etc. So coming from someone who lives in a country that is so very passionate about their sports as well, I think we are not quite as passionate as the UK perhaps, but certainly not far behind.
For sure. Now let's look at the worst things about Australia according to ChatGPT. The climate. That's a funny one because normally the climate is on the best, but I definitely see what it means here. Some parts of Australia, especially in the interior, can experience extreme heat and drought conditions, and bushfires can occur frequently. Now, I know Australia has a lot of sun. However, what I've noticed after learning about Australia is you have a lot of extremes. Now, I know the UK weather is, sometimes a bit dreary, but we quite often have a steady weather. You roughly know what you're going to get. Whereas in Australia, you're either the sun is right on top of you, burning your skin, or you have floods, or it's so extreme that it's hard to judge what it's going to be within the next few weeks or whatever, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, I'm going to have to disagree with that. Yeah, if you live in some parts of Victoria and in Tasmania, then you never know what's going to happen within a matter of hours. The weather will change so frequently within the day. But in terms of saying, well, the weather's not consistent because you get floods and storms and stuff like that, they're not something that are a regular occurrence. We have had some pretty nasty floods in the last couple of years, but that's not something that happens every year. I think for the most part you can expect consistency with the weather here in Australia. Here in Bendigo, I feel confident that come the start of spring, so from maybe the beginning of September right through till March or April, I know that I'm not going to need any jumpers. I know that once we hit summer, I'm going to be in shorts pretty much every single day. I think that's pretty consistent. And I think you'll find that for most of the non-temperate regions in Australia, that people would say that the weather is fairly consistent depending on the season. So it is consistent for the season. Obviously, like I said, the temperate zones like Tassie and parts of Victoria that have that temperate climate, that can be a little bit interesting. You never know what you're going to get. They do say about Melbourne and Tasmania, if you don't like the weather, come back in 5 minutes. But for the rest of the country, yeah, I disagree with you there, Rob. I think there is plenty of consistency. Things like floods, etc., are anomalies, not something that are going to happen quite regularly.
So I know some would say the climate is one of the best things, but I actually agree with ChatGPT in that it's probably one of the worst things because you don't know what you're going to get. There's too many extremes.
Yep, I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with him here. Like I said, you might get extremes in the temperate zones, but I think the climate is one of the best things about Australia, largely because you can choose to relocate. If you're someone who can't cope with the heat, you can choose to move south and find somewhere that has a different type of climate. We have a range of climates in Australia, and I think that there is a climate to suit everyone, depending on what region you go to. So I think that that is actually a good thing, not a bad thing.
Cost of living. The cost of living can be high with expensive housing, food, and entertainment. Now, yes and no. I've already discovered your fuel costs, your energy costs are so much cheaper than over in the UK. However, alcohol, wow, that's expensive. Your alcohol, for example, is really expensive. Some food is more expensive, some is cheaper. Now, that's so in that sense, I don't know how true the cost of living is because I think, like I said earlier, it sort of evens itself out to a similar to over here, but you earn more generally.
Now, I'm not in a position to comment on how Australia compares with other countries, but I will say that this has been said, what Rob is saying here has been said by so many people, that it is comparable and that there are different factors, so that there is the fact that we have higher wages here. We do have more affordable power and gas in Australia, more affordable fuel. We don't have tipping if you're looking at it from the US perspective, meaning that what you pay at a restaurant is all you pay, you don't have tipping on top. I think if you're outside of the touristy areas, then it is probably comparable with other countries and it is not as expensive as some people believe.
The distance, this is a massive one that hit us when we came to Australia. The first day we went from Melbourne to Geelong and all the way to Lorne along the Great Ocean Road, and that took all day. All day. Things are so far. Australia is a vast country. Travelling between cities and regions can be time consuming and expensive. Now, I don't think it's massively expensive, depending on where you live. Airport flights, most of the time, are quite cheap because that's the easiest way to get from city to city. Your fuel is cheaper. I think the time consuming one is the big thing. But from what Aussies say, you get used to it and it just becomes a part of life. So I think it's the learning curve when you go to Australia and you're experiencing it from the first time.
So I think he's made a good point here. It is highly subjective. People talk about the huge differences, but I think from watching other videos, there seems to be this notion that the distance thing is because if you want to travel from Melbourne to Sydney, for example, it's a really, really long drive with absolutely nothing in between, which is so not the case because there are so many places in between. Yeah, you may have stretches of road where you drive for half an hour or an hour between towns or cities, but it's not this place where you have population centres and then hours and hours and hours of nothing in between. And in terms of distances, like driving from Melbourne Airport to Lawn in a day, well, you know, things like that, yeah, I can understand if you come from the UK and you don't drive huge distances, that must seem like a long drive. But in Australia, we love our road trips, many of us, and people will, head off on a road trip and drive quite a distance in a day just to go somewhere different. So I don't know, I wouldn't say the distances are a bad thing. They allow for some pretty damn good holidays if you're into road trips. If you're not into road trips and you have to travel from one city to another, you can always fly. And in terms of travel between areas in states, well, it's not like you're going to do that every single day. You're not going to have to drive 5 hours or something just to get to work of a day. So if you are driving a distance, it's because you're doing it for a holiday or to visit family or friends. So I don't know. To me, I don't see the distances as being a negative.
Next one, Indigenous issues. Australia's treatment of its Indigenous population has been criticised by some with a history of discrimination and inequality. I don't have a massive right to give an opinion because I haven't experienced good or bad. What I would say is, from what I see, is things are slowly getting better, but that certainly it had a massive history of discrimination against the Indigenous population, for sure. For sure, that is why the Indigenous people have fought for so long for land to be given back to them, for them to be treated equally. But that's all I can say on that one because I have not been a part of it and touchy subject.
Okay, huge respect for anyone who turns around and says, I recognise that you guys have an issue with this, but it's not my place to tell you what's wrong with it or to comment on my thoughts on it. So straight away, Rob gets all my respect here. And I certainly, that's, had I not already been enjoying what he was saying with the other things, this would win me over straight away. Yeah, I think we are making some small, very, very small gains in terms of our Indigenous population. But there is still so much disparity right now. And there's so much discrimination and still so much hatred. And I find that sad. But at the same time, we're not the only country who do that sort of thing. That certainly doesn't justify it. But I just find it sad that this is a universal thing. That there are countries like Australia, and I won't name other countries because I know that people will get upset and come at me, but that there are countries like ours who still treat our Indigenous population as second-class citizens.
The last one, this is the worst thing about Australia, wildlife. While Australia's unique wildlife is a source of fascination, it really is. Kangaroos, echidnas, madness. It also is known for its dangerous creatures, including snakes, spiders, and crocodiles. Now, the funny thing is, that was the main thing that I thought we were going to really notice when we went to Australia, the dangerous animals. But did we see any that weren't in cages or vivariums? No. Now, granted, we were in the cities. We ventured out slightly to the smaller towns as well, but we didn't go into the bush. So bear that in mind. So, in the main cities, are there dangerous wildlife where most people live? Not really. Not really.
Honestly, the wildlife is one of the best things about Australia. And let's make something clear right here. If you come to Australia, chances are you may encounter a wallaby or a kangaroo, some of our totally harmless wildlife. You are almost certainly going to see some pretty stunning birds. Depending on where you go, you might even see a wombat or an echidna. They're things that are a certainty. Are you likely to encounter something that is going to kill you? Unless you go to somewhere specifically, like if you go to Australia Zoo, then you're going to see plenty of crocs there. Or if you go to some areas in the Northern Territory or Northern Queensland, you might see crocs. But there'll be signage there to tell you that they are about and to warn you to stay to certain areas. But are you going to encounter them just in regular city areas, or are you going to be killed by some Australian wildlife if you go bushwalking in Australia? No. I've addressed this on so many videos. But my comment on all this is, dear Americans, please stop putting these videos out saying that everything in Australia is going to kill you. That is complete and utter bullshit. I like the way that he's done this video. He has acknowledged at the start that these are statements that were generated by ChatGPT. These are not things that he is putting forward as his own perspective. And I think he's put a lot of thought into each of the things that's been covered. So kudos for that. I don't agree with some of the things that are in these comments, but that is not me saying I disagree with him for the most part, aside from the climate bit. But then if you are someone overseas and you hear all the media reports of floods in Sydney or roads washed out and stuff like that, then you're probably going to think that that is just a regular part of our climate. So he can't be blamed for that. But I really did quite enjoy this video. And I think he had some really, really intelligent points to put forward. So leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on the things that have been discussed here in this video? Do you agree with what Rob said? Do you disagree? Do you agree with some of the things I've said? What do you think are perhaps some of the best things about Australia and some of the worst things about Australia? If you're new, please subscribe, hit that like button, and stay tuned, plenty more content coming.